this is kind of an introductory guide to planning, so that hopefully you come away with a better understanding of how to plan, but also kind of the principles behind solid planning. Because I firmly believe that unless you are solid with a plan, unless you know where your book is going, it's A, going to be really hard to write, but B, it's not going to be the greatest experience for your reader. And I really believe that the person that you need to keep at the heart of all of this is your reader. It might feel like it's you because it becomes your baby, and you just so thinking about yourself and what you're putting into it, but essentially it comes down to the reader, and keeping them in mind at all times. At the end of it, I will be sharing, if we have time, I've got a course coming out soon, so I'm just going to, for the last couple of minutes, just show you what that's all about. But the vast majority of this is going to actually be good stuff that you can take away with you. So a little bit about me. Well, I was a teacher for a number of years, and then I decided in about 2015, I was still a deputy head teacher at the time, and I decided I was going to write a book, this one over my shoulder here, and I was going to write a book around behaviour management because it was something that kept coming up as an issue for newly qualified teachers. And I thought, you know what, I like writing, I've got a lot to say, as you probably can tell, I like to talk. So I thought what I will do is I will put everything I know into a book that can help them. And that was the first book. It's currently, I think, sold over 3,000 copies. So it's like a worldwide bestseller, but actually it was #1 in its category on Amazon for a little while around behaviour management and newly qualified teachers. So from that, I then decided, you know what, I'm going to take my enjoyment of writing, and I wrote 2 more books for newly qualified. One around managing other professionals and adults in the classroom, and then the third one is around special educational needs, because I used to be a special educational needs coordinator. So I knew those were areas that newly qualified sometimes struggled with. And then from that, I've ghostwritten 2 books in the personal development space for an Australian publisher. I can't share those with you because obviously contractually I never wrote them. So contractually I can't share that, but they were around taking responsibility for your life, just a small topic, and then the other one was around building healthy relationships. So that's kind of me, and yes, this is where I'm at now, is helping other people to realise their writing dreams. So today's aims, the first thing is I want you to help you avoid overwhelm, because writing a book is no mean feat, but also it's the idea of it that is almost so overwhelming you never get started. So I want you to come out of today feeling that it is possible to write your book. I also want to highlight some common mistakes people make when they think about planning and writing, because it tends to be there that you get stuck, and these are common things that crop up when I'm talking to people. And then also sharing a little bit of a planning strategy with you so that you can start to plan this brilliant book of yours. So that's kind of where I want you to be by the end of today, is to have these feelings, these vibes, and so you know exactly where you're going next. So where you are now, a lot of you have got an idea. Most of you, everybody here has got an idea. Some of them are fully formed ideas, some of them are just initial ideas, and that's fine. Sometimes it's that you're not sure if it's got legs or any other limbs for that matter. So it's about thinking to yourself, is this actually something that A, I could turn into a book, but B, are people going to want to buy it? Are people going to need it in their lives? So you're just not sure, and that's perfectly normal. And the big one, which is something that I often get in conversations with people, is they don't even know how to start. They don't know how to begin. They've got this idea, but how do you put it down on paper? How do you get it to flow? What's the structure? And all that kind of thing. So these are common issues, and if you are feeling any of those, don't feel like you're alone, because it's very, very common, and certainly something that I felt at the start. And I guess where you want to be is that you want to be confident, you want to know where your book's going, you want a clear direction, you want some structure to it, you want to know that if your reader picks up your book, you know, by the end of it, they're going to have had a great transformational experience. And I'm a keen reader. If you follow me on Insta, you'll know that. And I feel that some of the things that I've done in my life are directly from reading fantastic books that have inspired me to make change. So books are powerful, and I think that it's easy to forget that. I think it's easy to think, oh, well, you know, who's going to read this, or is anyone going to read this? And actually, it's about really honing in on who do you want to read your book. You're not trying to appeal to everybody, because then you appeal to nobody. So it's around really being clear on who you're writing for, but not underestimating the effect it can have on people who read your work. You want a clear plan so that you know how to start, and you want to be excited. You want to take overwhelm away, and that's always going to be there because that's part of being a creative. But you want to replace it with excitement instead, and you want to feel, you know, excited, pumped, ready to publish your work. So I'm hoping that today will start you on this journey to being here. I can't guarantee by the end of it you're all going to be here, but that's where I want you to be. So, sorry. So we're going to start with the common mistakes, and there are 6 common mistakes that people make when they start to write. The first one is they have no idea of structure. So they start to write, and what tends to happen is they give up because they think, oh, I know how to, I'll start, and I'll just start. I'm sure it will come to me. I'm sure it will come to me. And in the fiction world, we call these people plotters versus pantsers. And plotters are people a little bit like me, who plot out their story, and they know roughly what's going to be in each chapter. Pantsers are basically people who fly by the seat of their pants, and they just write and hope at some point it will all make sense. It's very, you know, personal. So don't think that if you're a pantser and you just want to write, by all means do that. But I think if it's your first book, to have some idea of a structure can help you feel less overwhelmed by it. When you're a seasoned writer, you can pants your life away. But with the first one, it tends to be structure is king or queen. The other thing is not really being sure who you're writing for, who your reader's going to be, who is going to be buying this on Amazon, who's going to be going into a local bookshop. That's my preference. And finding your book on the shelf and thinking, this is for me. The third thing is that your topic can sometimes be too broad, and this can make writing really hard because you end up kind of, we will come into this, but feeling a bit woolly, and you never really get into much detail, and then again you lose structure, etc. The fourth thing is doing too much research or too little research, and we will come on to all of these. The fifth thing is, you know, those limiting beliefs, lack of self-belief. Can I really do this? Is anyone going to read what I'm doing? People are going to think this is terrible. Judgment, judgment, judgment. And again, that's so common as creative people. We put our work out there, don't we? And it's a bit like, please like my work. But at the same time, trying to be confident in what you're doing. And then the sixth thing is good writing habits. If you don't have them, it's not going to get written. And, you know, there are many people, Stephen King, he writes every day 2,000 words before he does anything else, even on Christmas Day and his birthday. So, you know, it's about, he's prolific because he gets the word count down every day, and he's always producing content. So, you know, I know we're not all Stephen Kings of the world, but if we can learn anything from him, is that good habits are key. So what we're going to do is look at these just a little bit more. So if you don't have a clear structure, often writer's block can appear. Now, I don't know if I like the term writer's block, but I'm using it because it's commonly used. Writer's block is where you feel like you sit down to write, you've got these ideas and they're all going around your head, and then you sit down and you're like, I don't really know what to do first, you know, all that kind of thing. And it comes from not being entirely sure where you're going. And with non-fiction, this can be easier to remedy than sometimes with fiction, because, you know, when you're telling a story and you're having to build in, you know, all these other worlds and people and characters and all that, that can be a very overwhelming experience. With non-fiction, once you have a structure, it becomes almost like I don't want to say a paint by numbers, because that makes it sound too sort of, you know, simple and wishy-washy. It's not like that, but it is very, like, in this chapter I'm going to do this, and in this chapter I'm going to do this, and it's a bit more kind of structured like that. Whereas, you know, with fiction, you're having to weave in all sorts of plots and twists and all that. Clear structure, yeah, as I said, starting, but then giving up. But also, again, bringing it back to the reader. they learn nothing, they don't experience any transformation. They kind of feel like, I don't know whether you've read any books like this, but you come away feeling a bit like, oh, I wanted it to be this, and it really wasn't, and I didn't get a lot from that experience. And you don't want that. You want your reader to have an experience that does something for them, whatever the challenge may be, the reason they picked up your book. By the end of it, you want them to come away with something that is going to transform them, or give them more knowledge, or something that they can then take away and really implement. And I feel really strongly about this. I feel that for a lot of information books, for non-fiction, I really feel like people should be able to come away with a lesson or some actions that they can put into place to change something that they want to change. And if you're not providing that experience for them, it can be really sort of deflating for them. And there's a book called, I don't know if any of you have read it, called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And it is honestly, hands down, for me, the worst book I've ever, I couldn't even finish it. And for me, that is unheard of, because I'm an avid reader. I could not finish it. I tried so many times, and I just thought, you're just waffling, mate. I know what the idea behind it, the principle behind it was. And but I just felt so irritated that I never finished it. And I felt awful because it was brought to me by a friend. She's like, I know you love reading and I know you love stuff. And she was like, how was the book? I was like, oh, it was great. I didn't want to tell her I'd had to send it to the charity shop. However, you know, we don't want that for our readers. We want people to come away feeling inspired and motivated. So, which brings us to our reader. And this tends to be something that can be an issue. So you're unsure of who your reader is. It's not appealing to the right person. So if you're not clear on what it's about, who it's for, people can pick it up and come away feeling like I felt, but actually you weren't targeting them in the first place. So unless you're clear about who it is you want to pick up your book, if you do get a negative review, and people do and people don't, like, you know, everybody's got an opinion, and they're entitled to them, of course. But if they're picking it up and they're thinking it's going to be one thing and it's not, they're going to be pretty peed off, aren't they? You also need to be aware of your reader's journey. So we will come on to this in a bit more detail in a little while, but it's around the journey they go on from picking your book up, reading it, and where are they at the end. And I like to think of it almost as, how are they feeling at the start? Why are they picking a book up? How are they going to feel at the end? And then the promise you make to them. Quite often in non-fiction, you'll find in the opening chapter, the author will write kind of, you know, ways to read this book, or how to read this book to get the most from it. And you're promising them that by the end of it, this is going to happen for them. And okay, you can't guarantee that, because what someone does with the information is down to them and they have to be responsible for that. But you want to feel like, they want to feel like, oh, they promised me this. And yeah, do you know what? I feel like I got that from this book. Mistake 3 is being too broad. You're too woolly, not enough detail. You know, it can be that then that again is not a very great reading experience. But it's also harder to write. If you're too broad, you're almost kind of just unsure really of what you should include, what you shouldn't include. How much detail should I go in about this? Should I, you know, and it then becomes almost a guessing game, and that's what puts people off. And then again, you know, if it's too broad, they're not going to take much from it. Too much research. Oh yeah, the non-fiction writers' method of choice. I'm just going to do a bit more research. I'm just going to do a bit more research. I'm going to do some more research because I don't think I've done enough research. No, okay, no. And I will tell you how best to do research in a little while, but it's a great procrastination device. Yeah, it's one of those things where you start to write and you think, oh, now I know I read something about that somewhere, let me just look at this. Or, oh, now I'm sure I watched a YouTube video, and then before long, an hour has passed, you've gone down a YouTube rabbit hole or research rabbit hole, and you're nowhere nearer to completion. And it can be irrelevant if you're not focused with it. And if you do too little research, again, you're not helping yourself. You need to know, and we, as I say, we'll come on to these, where your book would sit if it's in a bookshop. Who would be next to it? What area of the bookshop would it be in, and why? So, you know, research is important, but it's about finding the balance. Yeah, number 5, letting your inner critic just keep, nattering to you on your shoulder, and being led by your limiting beliefs. And this is, God, this could be a workshop in itself. But I just want you to be aware that it's very common when you're putting yourself out there in a creative way, in a way where you can get very judgmental people giving you feedback on something that has taken you months to write, you've poured your heart into. And the very thought of those people can be overwhelming, but so can your inner voice. So can that kind of managing that is important. And again, this leads to you don't write at all, or you keep restarting, you write a bit, then you delete everything you've written because it was, you look at it and you think, who's going to read that? And then again, leads to procrastination. So, and the final one is one of my my loves, which is good writing habits. I love habits. I love them. If I could go back in time and start again, I think I'll probably do a psychology, something to do around habits and human behavior, because I find this fascinating, but I won't go into too much detail here. But without any habits, like a deadline, setting deadlines, you're not going to, it's unlikely a book will be finished, or it'll be one of those things that you think, oh, I'll come back to that. And often I hear people say, I'm going to come back to that over the summer. When I'm a bit quieter, I'll come back to that over the summer, and then summer comes and goes. Maybe you do another half a page. So setting deadlines can be really, really instrumental in getting this done. If you don't have a deadline, you don't know how much you need to write each day. So again, you have a burst of energy, and then you have days without writing, and then you have another burst where you think, yes, I'm going to do this. This is today. Mine is always on Monday. I'm definitely going to start this. I always do that about diets, exercise, writing. On Monday or next month, I'll definitely start next month. We tell ourselves these things, don't we? And you're letting, again, procrastination dictate. So having a manageable schedule is going to be key for getting this book planned and written. Okay, so what are the solutions? So this is where we're going to go into these mistakes and look at ways that you can then use these to help you plan effectively. Now, I don't know whether, I know Jack's on the call. Jack used to be a teacher, and I know there may be other teachers among you. So if there are, I'm going to dip back into my year 6 teaching days, not because I think you're 11 years old, but because actually what I'm about to show you works really well for planning a book. And obviously I've adapted it for book planning, but this is kind of something I used to teach quite often, which are the 5 W's. And if you wrote nonfiction in school, it's likely that you use these to help you. So it's the 5 W's: who, what, why, when, where. And these can be really helpful to you to start getting your plan to take shape. And you can then use these to just check yourself all the time. Am I going the right direction? Am I still doing what I said I was going to be doing? So we're going to start, and I've changed the order of these around, so I apologize because I wanted what to come at the end. So I've started with why, as Simon Sinek tells you to do. Start with why. If you've ever read Start with Why, I recommend it because it's instrumental into thinking about anything you're starting. So why is your book important to you, but also why is it important to your business? Now, you could be writing purely from a business perspective. You haven't maybe got the emotional attachment to it. You're like, I know for my business, I want a book that I can give to people, recommend to people, use as a tool for further business endeavors. And quite often people use them for courses, people use them for talks, and then at the end of the talk, you've got your book there, and if you enjoyed this talk, here's my book. People use them for getting on guests on podcasts. They use them as a marketing tool, essentially. And that is, that's a great way to use a book if you're writing, for your business. And all of you here are wanting to do that. But there's also, I can't deny, there is going to be a part of you, even if it's tiny, there's going to be a part of you where think about, why is it important to you? What is it that you want to do for yourself? Because I'm an advocate of empowering people to do things for themselves so that you come away out of this experience with a sense of pride, a sense of achievement, whatever it is to you. Think about that as well. Don't just think of the business, but why are you doing this for you? And you might be surprised at what you come out with. And then, well, as I said, it comes back to the self-belief thing. Why use why? It's a terrible thing to say, but it makes sense. Why use the why principle? Because when you are doubting yourself, if you know why you're doing it in the first place, you can then think to yourself, okay, I'm having a day today where it's just not working for me. And you can come back to it and think, yeah, but I know why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I want to transform people from doing this to this, or I want to help people who struggle with this. So if you know why you're writing it, that lack of self-belief thing can be challenged because you've got a firm grounding in why you're doing this. And then really dig deep. What outcome do you want for this book? And it might be that you want it to be a bestseller, and you know, that is all well and good. But you also need to think, you know, if that's not your goal, you know, what is the outcome that you want? Is it just something that you know, that you're, as I say, going to use as part of a sales funnel, or is it going to be something that, you know, you want to do it because you want to see your name on the cover, and all these things, you know, and I'm not, all of those are valid. You know, don't get me wrong. I love seeing, you know, my friend bought me this for my birthday, which is the cover of the first book. And I loved it. Every time I come into the cabin in the morning, I love seeing this. I love it because it just reminds me, like, yeah, God, I did that. You know, so, and the outcome for me was to help people, but also because I bloody well wanted to see my name on the cover of a book. So, you know, it's different for everybody. And maybe you're not as selfish as me. So the next thing to think about is, when is your deadline? Now, I really encourage you to have an idea around this, because like I said before, if you don't, it just gets put off and put off and put off. And I'm not going to lie to you, writing a book isn't essential for your business. It's not essential. It's not one of those things that's going to dramatically, you know, overnight transform your business. Of course it isn't, because you need to, you know, it's all down to the marketing of it and, you know, getting it out there into the hands of people, etc. It's not to say it won't transform it come, you know, months down the line, but it's not something that if you don't do it, your business is going to fail. So it's about, this is why I say to you, give yourself a deadline, because there are always other things that can be coming up instead of, oh, I need to do that instead of writing. Or actually, no, do you know what? I need to do that first, and then I'll come back to my writing. So get ruthless, set yourself a deadline. When is this book going to be written? You know, get yourself, hold yourself accountable. But I love, I've got a friend of mine, Shona Chambers. I know some of you may know her off Instagram. She's writing her second book, and she spoke to me about it before, and she then said to me, and then she put it out on Instagram, I think I'm going to write my second book. And I said to her, I was like, I love it. Immediately you're holding yourself accountable. You've put it out there. People are going to be like, oh, I heard you're writing your second book. And there is nothing slightly annoying, but also great about people going to, how's your book coming along? How's your book coming along? I hear you're writing a book. And my friends do it to me all the time, and they know that my novel is long and it's a process, let's just say. And every time I see them, I know one of them always says to me, so how's your book coming along? And I know before she even opens her mouth, that's the first thing she's going to say. I mean, it's lovely because she's supportive, but it also makes me think, oh my God, the next time I see Rachel, I've got to make sure I'm come along a bit more. So yeah, set yourself accountable. And even if it makes you do it, you could say to yourself, coming in January 2022, my book, and you've put it out there, and people are starting to be like, oh, you've got a book coming out. So deadlines are your friend. Don't be frightened of them. Of course, you can move them about. My editor's lovely. I've just had to move one of them with her for my novel. So it's not like set in stone, and you don't have to be like, oh, if I don't do it by this date, I'm a failure. It's nothing to do with that. It's more about having some sense of accountability, because at the end of the day, it's you and your laptop. So without that accountability, you know, I find that I just don't get it done. Now, the reason I'm saying this to you is because you can then work out your daily word count, which can help you when you're planning. You know that actually each day, once I've got my outline done, I'm going to be writing this amount each day. And the way I do this is, I say, for example, I might set myself a deadline for a non-fiction piece of writing, or the next book. I think to myself, right, I'm going to set myself a deadline of 10 weeks, for example, to get my first draft done. And then what I do then is I kind of think to myself, okay, right, I know I've got 10 weeks to do it. What's my word count? So say, for example, just because my maths is poor, say my word count, my first book, Keeping Bums in Seats, was about 30,000 words. So I might say to myself, okay, I've got 30,000 words. to do in 10 weeks, then I think to myself, okay, that's 3,000 words a week. Okay, that sounds like this, panic. Actually, okay, I know I write personally Monday to Friday. I let myself have the weekends off. So I know that I've got 5 days of the week, so 3,000 words. And then you're dividing that by 5. So, you know, you're going to do about 600 words a day. And then you start to think, oh, 600 words a day. Okay, that's manageable. That's better. And then I know people who do writing sprints. So they do a writing sprint of half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, 300 words in the morning, 300 words in the evening. And all of a sudden, 30,000 words becomes 300 words in the next half hour. And you're like, okay. And you do that, you build your good habits, which we'll come on to. And you can, in 10 weeks, have a book, a first draft. It might be sloppy, it might be horrendous, it will be, because it's the first draft and you've got to make your peace with that, the shitty first draft. But it's almost that you've got something to work with. You have something to edit and improve and work on. And I think that is the most important thing to remember, is the first draft is going to be shit. Okay? It is. Most of it, you might think to yourself, oh my God, this is dreadful. Who cares? No one else is going to see it. No one else is going to see it. So it can be shit. It can be. And I'm sorry if there are children around, I apologise. But just make your peace with it. So then think to yourself, right, I know I'm going to write 300 words or 600 words a day. I now need to think, where am I going to do that? Where is going to be the place that I go to every day to do this? And your brain loves familiarity, loves routine. So if you sit at the same place every day to write, your brain thinks, oh, okay, so when I sit here, I write. And it might sound daft, but my brain knows that when I come to the cabin in the morning at 9 o'clock, that there's an hour of writing ahead of me, because I write for an hour a day. And I know, and it knows that. It doesn't argue with me, because it might try to, but it knows, and I know that I rely on that habit. And then think about, when are you going to write those X amount of 100 words a day? Because again, some people are night owls, some people are early birds. Got that right. Morning, early birds. I write best in the morning because I'm at my most creative then. But I know other people who write when everyone else has gone to bed. So it really is dependent on what's good for you. But again, the more you can do it at the same time in the same place, the more your brain gets the habit and starts to realise, okay, I know that when I sit down to do this. And some people, and I've done this before, set a timer for 30 minutes and they just go 30 minutes. Turn your phone on airplane mode and just write for half an hour. Done. The rest of the day is your own. You know, it's that kind of idea. So yeah, think about that when you're planning, because once you know how much you're going to write each day, it starts to become a little less overwhelming. This one, where will you publish it? It's individual to you. You might want to self-publish. Great. Amazon is great for that. There are other places other than Amazon. Draft to Digital is one of them, and there are others, but I can never remember what they are. But Amazon's the easiest. It's so easy. Once you've edited it and formatted it, and there are people out there to help you with both of those things, you just upload it, and you get a cover design, and it's up. And people can buy it immediately, because it can be an ebook, but it also can be a print on demand thing as well. And I have both of those for all 3 of my books. But it might be that you want to pitch to a traditional agent, publisher, and that's fine too. But it's almost like you need to think, is this something for Amazon? Is it just something for my website that I'm just going to pop on my website as a downloadable thing? That's easy too, really easy. Put it as a PDF, done. Or is it that you want to go down traditional publishing route? So have an idea of that before you start, because again, that will, if you need an editor, which I thoroughly recommend, you're going to need to, in the planning stages, be starting to ask around the availability of editors, because you might have your lovely first draft and be like, okay, I need an editor please next week, and they're like, well, they've got a 3-month waiting list. So bear that in mind. The research thing, where will your book sit? As I said, go into it. If you think about a bookshop, who is it next to? So if I was writing a book about habits, which I'd love to do one day, my book, I'd love to be next to Gretchen Rubin. I'd love it to be next to BJ Fogg, Tiny Habits, James Clear, Atomic Habits, and oh no, the name's gone. Oh, Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit. So I know roughly in my lovely big picture thinking, that my book around habits would sit with those sorts of books. On Amazon, you can use that function. It's like people also bought. So when you buy a book, if you scroll down a bit on Amazon, it will say people often buy this with, or people bought this with. And for my books, Keeping Bums in Seats is normally alongside a book called Getting the Buggers to Behave by Sue Cowley. And it's also next to The Noisy Classroom by Rob Clevin. So I know roughly where it sits. That's the important research to do at this point. The research you do in your actual writing, and I was talking to Jack about this on a call recently, we were saying that to avoid the research rabbit holes, my advice to you would be in the planning stages, just make a note of the research you want to do in your plan. Don't go away and do the research. Think to yourself, okay, in this chapter, I know I'm going to want to talk about this. Just write down, look up, whatever the research is. So for example, I knew in my book, I used a couple of quotes from a Guardian article around the percentage of teachers leaving the profession. So I knew that I wanted to look up that article, but I didn't want to do it now because it would take me away from the planning process. So just make a note in the plan, because actually you can then take some time to come back and do that research, but it then becomes focused research. It doesn't just become, let me Google this and see how far I go. The other thing is, once you've written your first draft, that's when you can then add in research. So almost get the bulk of it down and then do the research bit that you add to the bulk of your writing. And again, as I said, where does this book sit in your sales funnel? Is it something you're giving away as a freebie? Is it something that is kind of the first layer of people getting to know who you are? So just think about that in the planning stages. You know, where's it going to sit in your business? What job is it going to do to help promote your business? I'm just going to have a drink before I pass out. 1 second. So that how long it is since I've taught anything, I now can't breathe. Okay, so the first thing, as I said, the reader is the person you have to come back to all of the time. You have to consider them. And you might want to write, and I did some mentoring with a lovely occupational therapist. And what had happened in her books is that she'd written a lot about her life story as to how she became an occupational therapist and why it was relevant to a degree, but actually as a reader, we're all egocentric, aren't we? So we want to know, how is it going to help us? And me reading about her journey to being an occupational therapist wasn't helping me with my child who needed occupational therapy advice, or me who needed occupational therapy advice for my child. So anecdotally, stories are excellent because stories sell. Stories are the thing people love, but they have to be anecdotally. And if you read any books that are great, I'm reading Grit at the moment by Angela Duckworth, and I absolutely bloody love it. But what she does at the beginning of each chapter is she has a little story to start about a person she's interviewed or a person she knows about. And she was talking about Will Smith and how he says, you know, that people might be better than me at this and this and this, but they don't beat me in terms of, you know, the work ethic and being on that treadmill. So it was anecdotally a story about Will Smith. She then used that to then launch into what she knew around, you know, this aspect of having grit and a positive work ethic and perseverance. So again, never lose sight of your reader. Don't start telling them about yourself unless it is absolutely relevant to what you're saying. Otherwise, they're going to be like, don't really care, which is harsh because you care, they don't. So if you've done ideal client work before, start to think about the similar sort of thing. Don't think too much around demographics. Yes, okay, gender might be important to you if you're a parenting coach and you're deciding to talk about the early stages of motherhood or something like that. But start to think along the lines of the psychographics. What are they struggling with? And I like to think that if I'm buying a book, like I go into a bookshop and at that time I'm normally struggling with something or interested in something or something I've heard on a podcast where I'm like, oh, that person sounds really interesting. So I go into a bookshop or I go onto Amazon with purpose. You don't tend to, Amazon's a search engine after all, so you don't tend to just start randomly searching on Amazon for stuff that you might read. You tend to go with recommendations, things you've heard or seen on podcasts or interviews, or that you're struggling with something and you're like, I really want to know how to do boom, and you type that in. So just think about that in terms of reader. What are they struggling with? What's the problem that they've got that your book can solve? Or what knowledge don't they have yet that your book will give them? So that's really important. And also think of the emotion. People buy on emotion and justify with logic. Okay, so people are going to go and they're going to look at your book because of an emotion they're feeling. It might be confusion, it might be sadness, it might be pissed offedness, if that's the word. But they're going in with emotion. It might even be curiosity. Whatever it is, you have to tap into that. So you need to know what that journey is for that person. And if they are confused at the beginning, think of the journey you're going to take them on so that by the end, they aren't confused anymore. They're absolutely crystal clear on something. What they do with that information, you don't need to worry about, but you have to give them the information in the first place. Otherwise, they're not going to be a satisfied reader. And again, think about transformation and knowledge. What they're going to get from this, okay? What did they not know? This is like a lesson. What did they not know at the beginning that they're going to know by the end? So it's almost that is what a book does. So for me, with my newly qualified and the behavior management book, they don't have strategies, or the emotion is lack of confidence. So they're picking up my book because they are scared about how to manage their class's behavior. They're not confident. By the end of it, they have strategies / toolkit, and they have more confidence. And that's what they get from reading my book. Okay, so unless you're clear on that, it's going to be tricky. Okay, this is the biggie. This is the biggest one. The reader and the niche topic are the two biggest things. The other things are important, but these two are the most important. So when it comes to what you write about, and some of you have got solid plans, some of you it's just an idea at the moment, my absolute advice to you is go with what you know to start with. This is your first book. Go with what you feel confident with. So when you're thinking about your topic, think to yourself, what could I talk about? So for me, I could talk about this till the cows come home, but I could also talk about habits. I could also talk around mindset. These are the things that I absolutely love to talk about, people ask me about, and I feel confident that if you can say it in a 20-minute presentation, you can bloody well write a book on it. So if you have something that you are regularly talking about, or regularly being asked about, or that you feel confident in, go with that to start with. That's not to say you can't write those other ideas that you've got. And as creative people, you're going to have the ideas flying in and distracting you all the time. But stick with one. Choose one and think to yourself, in your gut, you know the topic. You know it. We all do. Our guts are brilliant things. So if you keep coming back to the same thing and the same thing, that's the one. Don't let other things try and distract you. I had keeping bums in seats in my head for about 5 years, and I kept coming back to it and coming back to it. And then I just thought, just bloody write it, will you? Because then you can stop talking to yourself about it in your head and sound like a lady who might need to stop listening to her inner voice quite so much. So yeah, choose your niche. Confidence and knowing is important. Avoid being too broad, and we're going to come on to how to do this in a minute, but I will touch on it now. So when I first started writing, my idea was to write a book for newly qualified teachers. I thought to myself, yes, I can cover all they need to know about the first year of teaching. So I started to map it out. I did some spider diagrams. And actually, I started to realise that within that, there were these massive topics. Massive topics included behaviour management. It included the teacher standards. It included special educational needs, because that is a minefield for everybody, because there's so many different things to consider. Working with teaching assistants and other professionals. It was around work-life balance, well-being. And if I'd written a fourth book for teachers, it would have been around work-life balance and well-being. So I realised that if I went too broad, I wasn't going to do this justice. And there are books out there, like there's one, How to Survive Your AQT Year, which does cover everything. But I know it sounds horrendous when I say it out loud. I don't care about teacher standards enough to write about it. So I knew that wasn't going to be a topic for me. But I thought to myself, do you know what behaviour management is? I can't do it justice in a chapter. of a book that's very broad. I needed to do something which really went into detail. So if you're worried that I've got this topic, maybe you talk about something very, very niche. If you can talk about it for that amount of time, you've got such a vast amount of knowledge to put into a book. So it's really hard to be too niche. I mean, it's really hard. It's easy to be too broad. So if you're not sure yet, really look at yourself and think, okay, and I'll show you how to do it in a second. But start to map out your idea. And if you realize you have big topics within your idea, start to look at those and pick those out and think, oh, that could probably be a book. That's a better, I could really go into detail about this. So yeah, I mean, obviously there are people out there, but if you think about like the topic of, say, habits, for example, BJ Fogg's done Tiny Habits, James Clear's done Atomic Habits, very similar themes, but they've taken habits as a bigger topic and they've really niched into making them tiny, making them, you know, small and achievable. And you know, yes, of course they touch on what a habit is, but actually it's more than that. It's really niched down into this very particular area of habits. So start to think, you know, if you're feeling that your area is too broad, look for bigger topics. And then also, if you're still not sure, use your client knowledge. What do people talk to you about? What comes up in conversation? What are you commonly asked about? Because all those conversations can feed into your plan. And when you start to think about what to include, you actually know, well, people often ask me about this and this comes up. So jot all those down as well. Right. So you've got those 5 W's. I'm just going to check the time. Oh, good. I've got those 5 W's and you think to yourself, okay, Steph, like I know who I'm writing about. I kind of know my topic. I've got myself these wonderful habits that I'm going to set up and I know my word count. What the hell do I do now? And that's okay, because that is obviously the next step. So this is what I will cover here, but I would do more of within if you come on one of my courses. This is kind of really what we look at. So this is the big picture thinking. Okay, so what I did here, this is just an example. So I took, I said to you, I took the idea of being an NQT and I looked at the topics that would come up for any NQT, and behaviour management was one of them. Take your topic, and I use this electronic one, which is called Miro, which produced this. But I mean, normally if I wasn't presenting, I'd be in a notebook because I'm a notebook girl. But say this is what my notebook would look like. And what you do is just set a timer if it helps you, because this can be quite, you think, oh, I'm never going to think about all the things. You'd be surprised. Set a timer for, say, 10 minutes. Put your topic in the middle. So my topic for the book was behaviour management, and just brainstorm everything that you can about this topic. Just chuck it down on a piece of paper or on an app. And these were the things that I thought of. Okay, so typically people would be worrying about how to manage parents, which, to be fair, could be also another topic for a book. And then also, why is it important? Why should I care about behaviour management? How to manage the first day. I knew people worried about the first day and that panicky system of dreaming about your class not listening to you. And then you've also got here, and then I decided, okay, how could I make an acronym? And I'm such a fan of acronyms, I'm such a geek, but I came up with what I called the simple approach to behaviour management. So I thought to myself, oh, what could simple stand for? And I then came up with systems, implementation, management, pace, language, expectations. So that's another idea I had. Then I looked at special educational needs, behaviour, pupils with social, emotional, mental health problems. I knew I'd need to cover that in a chapter. I also then knew I'd need to think about teachers' self-confidence, self-belief, their mental health. So as you can see, it's essentially by setting a timer for yourself, you kind of think, right, I'm really focused on this for 10 minutes, and you'll be surprised. Stuff will keep coming and coming and coming. And what you'll see is on the, where I say for I've got dealing with parents, I then had like, oh, okay, what's that normally about? Okay, that's normally tricky conversations with parents because they can be difficult when it comes to behaviour and their children, especially if they don't think their children ever do anything wrong. And then there's also how to have good communication with parents to keep that relationship going. So as you can see, it was almost like I had an idea which then branched off into another idea, which could then become my subheadings in my chapters. So basically all of these became chapter headings. So why children behave in different ways became a chapter because I wanted teachers to understand that there's more to it than just naughty behaviour, because actually behaviour is communication, so that children are always trying to tell you something. That dealing with parents would be a chapter. So as you can see, you start to think to yourself, right, I've got every idea I've got, that actually what could be chapters here? That could be a chapter, that could be a chapter. It could have been actually that, say for example, working with a teaching assistant might have gone into a chapter that was just around other professionals. So it's not to say these are all going to be specific chapters, but it gives you an idea of what you can start to think about in terms of chapters. So that's kind of where I would say to you is the best place to take your initial thoughts, and it's just to brain dump them down. And what your brain will do is when you start this process, you'll be washing the dishes, you'll be drying your hair, you'll be doing something, and it will go, oh yeah, that's another thing. And you can add it and add it. So don't think that your 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever time you set yourself to do this initially is going to be all of your answers magically appear. It will be a case of over the next few days, week or whatever, you start to think, oh, that could also be, that could be there, that could be there. And it starts to take shape. And the overwhelm becomes less because you've got the thoughts that are here and they're now on paper. You might not like spider diagrams, and that's absolutely fine. You might do a list or whatever feels right for you. But again, just get them out of your head, get those ideas onto some paper, because when they're on paper, you can look at them objectively. You're not thinking to yourself all the time, oh, is that the right one? Is that, should I? And you're trying to remember them all. Just get them down and then look at them. And some of them won't make it into your book, and that's fine too. You might think, actually, do you know what, that's actually, no, I'm not going to do that, and you cross that out. So this is really just a tool to start the process of thinking about some of the chapters you're going to include. So now, just before we finish, I have a course coming up, which is a book called Plan Your Book with Confidence. And essentially, it's a 6-week group program that's going to help you plan everything that we've talked about, but also more, so that you end up with a detailed outline. And what I mean by a detailed outline is that by the end of it, you would have each chapter planned out with exactly what your subheadings are going to be, and your kind of what's going to be bullet points of what's going to be under each subheading, so that you can then take that outline, go away and flesh out those bullet points. You know where your research is going and all that kind of thing. So this is really a very in-depth process. So you come out basically with a handy guide to sit down and just start to write the thing, because otherwise, you know, it can, that's what takes the overwhelm away, is that kind of outline. So what it is just 6 weekly group sessions via Zoom. You'd have access to a Facebook group where you can ask questions between sessions, and then you've also got lifetime access to those recordings, so you can come back to them if for any reason life gets in the way and you need to come back to writing. And then it starts on the 10th of June. I was going to start on the 8th of June, then I realised it was my 40th birthday, and as much as I love everybody, I don't particularly want to be doing that on my birthday. So I've gone for a Thursday when I will officially be 40. And yeah, it's 6 weeks, and it's an hour session. But if you can't make them live, they're all recorded, so you can always get access. So that is me. Now, if you haven't connected with me, which I'm sure you have, then please do on social media. I'm just going to take, I've got a few minutes left at the end. I've now, I'll stop sharing, that'll be an idea. And you can ask any questions you have. Well, let's just try and work out why this isn't letting me stop sharing. Having a moment. Right, if you want to unmute, if you've got any questions, and while I try and faff about with why I can't stop sharing my screen, that'd be great. There we go, stop share. Oh. Okay. Any questions? The investment for the program? Yes, I can, Max. Well, I'll just tell you. So, oh, did I go past that? Brilliant. I amused myself. It's so for the course, it's an introductory one. Sorry, Max. It's an introductory price because I've not done this course before. So it's £350 if you pay in full, and it's £195 if you want to pay in 2 instalments. If you need the instalments to go over 3 months, then listen, I know what it's like investing in yourself. You can invest in so many things. So if you want to talk to me about installments, I'm always open to that. So please don't feel, you know, that you can't ask me, because I want to support you in any way that I can. So Rhiannon's asked, if you do want the more traditional publishing route, where do you start? Okay, that's a good question, Rhiannon, sorry. Yeah, traditional publishing is sometimes a kind of, it's difficult. I'm not going to lie to you, it's difficult. It's not to say it's impossible. The thing that traditional publishers want more than anything is somebody with an established audience, because they'll either have an established audience or a lot of evidence of quality writing, and say, for example, a blog that people read continually, and you know, you've got a big email list. The reason they want that is because sadly it's a business, isn't it, publishing, and they want to make it easy for themselves. So they want people who can market it to an audience that are ready to buy it. I thought about traditional publishing, and that was the answer that I got back from a friend of mine who was traditionally published. She's got a very well-known kind of business, so she's got a lot of people that would buy her stuff. But she said she knows that that's what they're looking for at the moment, because it's a tricky market, and it's not a dying market, but it's certainly a market that's plateauing in terms of adult fiction and non-fiction. Children's fiction is always much better performing. So if you want to, lots of publishers on their websites, I would really look at publishers who publish regularly in your niche. So for example, in the education niche, I know there are publishers who are educational publishers, and I would look to ask them. But look for publishers who, say, Hay House, for example, are publishers of people like Gabby Bernstein, Mel Robbins, possibly. So each publishing house will have a list of, and they like to publish stuff within this genre, in this niche. So they will have on their website what's called their book proposal, your manuscript submission proposal. And the way non-fiction works is different to fiction. Fiction, you go and you say to a publisher, I've got this manuscript, would you like to read it? And most of the times they say, no, bugger off. But what happens is they would want you to have your manuscript written. For you, if you're writing non-fiction, they don't necessarily want the book to be written already. They will take it on a proposal. So you would say, this is my idea for a book. This is what would be roughly within each chapter. So you need to have an outline or a synopsis of what's going to be in each chapter. And then they would look at it and think, is this something that we would publish? Are we interested in this? And then they commission you to write what you've said. And it goes like that, really. So it's definitely worth thinking about, but don't feel that it's something that is, it's not the only way to be published. I know there's a certain kind of level of kind of how you feel about being published traditionally, and don't get me wrong, I want my children's book traditionally published, so I get that, but don't feel like that's the only way that you can be published, because I know the royalties are shocking. I'm just going to tell you that now. They're 10% of the cover price of the book. So I know children's authors who get 36p for a book, per book, right? Whereas self-publishing is 70% royalties. So it's almost like, I'm not saying it's all about money, for goodness sake, of course it isn't, but if you want it as part of your business model, then you need to consider the financial side of it. And if you've got a good marketing strategy, you've got people who are ready and willing to buy, my thing would be, I've never, in all the 3,000 copies of that one I've sold, no one's ever asked me who published or ever commented on the fact that it's self-published. No one's ever commented. It looks like a normal book, the print copy, it looks exactly like the cover, it literally just looks like a book. The only thing that they would probably notice in the inside cover, it doesn't say published by whoever. So, but they don't care. That's the thing to remember, people want solutions. They genuinely don't care how it's delivered to them in a book format. They just want the book. They want the answer. If you're a good writer, you've edited it well, you've had a professional cover design, and it's all formatted, they wouldn't know, and I doubt they care. Is my truth, the truth of it. Yeah. So that's why if you get it properly edited with a proper cover design, it is going to look professional. And if that, that's important, I get that, and I agree with you on that. But don't feel like it's it's going to look crap, because it won't. It looks nice. It does look nice. But again, it's personal choice. It's personal choice. Any more questions? What are the costs of editing? Yeah, good question, Jack. Yeah, the costs of editing depend on the editor. That's a shit answer, isn't it? Sorry, God, everyone's like, well done, Steph. Yeah, obviously. I have some editing. I'm very much supporting small business person, so I have some lovely little editor friends on Instagram that I can recommend to you. But I would say you're looking at 500-ish. I think I spent approximately that each time. I can't be, because I wrote them all quite a long time ago now, about 5 years ago now. But yeah, it's not astronomical. And I think that if you can find somebody who loves your book, the editors for mine, this one in particular, this is my baby, sorry, I keep talking about it, that she was invested in it. Like, she really loved the topic, and she was so interested. She'd always ask me really like interesting, relevant questions, like, do you need to include this? Do people know what that jargon is, or whatever? So you want somebody who's invested in what you're doing, someone who genuinely cares that it's going to look good. So I would always go for a small editor, somebody who's just, passionate about books, like you. Cover design, again, it can vary. You can get them for probably a couple of hundred. You can go on some places and get it much cheaper. There is something called 99 Designs. I've not been on it for a long, long, long time. But they are, I think, £99, which would make sense, seeing as it's called that. So, again, it's. I had these all of mine are similar. They've all got the chalk theme. They're all the same font. It was the same cover design for the three of mine. For the three of mine, because she kind of knew the teachery look I was going for, and she came up with the idea of the chalk and the blackboard and that sort of thing. So, yeah, just find somebody who you like the look of. Always look and see what else they've done. That would be my advice. And see, do these look professional? Do they look nice? So yeah, that's it really. I would say to you that you're probably looking at £500 to £800, as in the cost of editing plus the cover designer. That's the only thing. Anyone else? I'm glad you found it useful. I've realised I packed a lot in to that. So please, if you go away and your brain does that thing where you think to yourself, oh, I had another question, please just honestly just email me, ask me on Insta. If you're part of the Facebook group, then just ask away. God, I'm always happy. I could talk about writing forever. I'm glad you've got a good place to start from. And like I say, I know it's daunting and it can feel overwhelming. So, question away, ask away. I will answer you. So yeah. Thanks for coming, everybody. I've enjoyed it. I'm going to lie down for about 3 hours now, but I've enjoyed it. That's what happens when you don't teach for a long time. Oh, sorry, Sarah. How do you balance talking about yourself if you're writing part autobiographical? Yeah, no, I get that. If it's part autobiographical, absolutely, I get that. I think it's just about keeping it relevant and not going down the path of just talking about yourself for too long. It's at that balance of, this is what happened to me, or this is why this is important, and this is how that can help you. So it's a balance, isn't it? And I think it's only when you've written it that you can then look back on that balance and think, have I got it right? Do I need to add more about myself here or less about myself? And a good editor will be the one to say to you, if you go to someone who specializes in that kind of writing, they're worth their weight in, honestly worth their weight in gold, and they'll be able to advise you. Storyworthy. Oh, let's check that out. Brilliant. Oh, Sarah's got another book idea. Sorry, Sarah. Yeah, but remember what I said, go with what you're comfortable and confident with. Yeah, and that's the great place to start. That's not to say you then couldn't write further books down the line about other things, but always start with the thing that you feel most confident with. Okay, right, I shall see you lovely, lovely ladies soon, and thank you so much.